I recently learned about a book called Alchemised. Written by SenLinYu, the novel is the official rewrite of a Harry Potter fanfiction, Manacled, which even I'd heard of. 2025 has been a real year for Germani fanfictions being adapted into real books, and Alchemised isn't even the first Germani fic to make waves. However, it is the first fic to be greenlit for a film adaptation prior to the book even being released, with studios and publishers reportedly fronting millions for this project. Ironically, the preordained success of this book is an echo of Harry Potter's success, Alchemised being based off of a Harry Potter fanfiction. Personally, I haven't read Alchemised yet. From doing further research, the novel seems to be a dark romance. While I don't have anything against the genre, it's not one I've explored before. There is a perverse part of me that wants to read this book because some people are bashing it. But parts of this novel give me Haunting Adeline vibes, which I've never had an interest in reading. I give no shade to anyone who loves Haunting Adeline or books like it. But for me personally, I have mixed feelings about reading a novel which has the protagonist fall in love with their abuser, especially if there's sexual abuse involved. That is not a plotline I can enjoy through a romantic lens. I can handle such a storyline in a horror or thriller context. But for me, torture and fuzzy feelings don't mix. Do I think dark romance has its place? Yes, I do. Whether or not it's for me doesn't preclude the genre from having inherent value. I want to discuss the genre and its validity in this video, as well as acknowledge those who don't like the genre, and explore detractors' reasons for being disturbed by its popularity. Because for me, it's a gray area. There isn't a simple answer here, but I respect the opinions of others, even when they disagree with me, provided they don't belittle my opinions or otherwise insult my intelligence because I don't see the world in exactly the same way they do. However, since this video ties into my larger discussion around Harry Potter, I'll also be discussing Harry Potter fanfiction, specifically whether or not writing or enjoying Harry Potter fanfiction is immoral, being perceived as indirect support for Harry Potter and, by extension, Rowling's views. Whether one can still enjoy Harry Potter while still disagreeing with Rowling is a question we'll be tackling, but with an emphasis on fanfiction. Before we get too far, I want to clarify what Alchemised is. In case there is any confusion, Alchemised is technically an original story. While it's based off of Manacled, a Harry Potter fanfiction which has since been removed from Archive of Our Own, it exists within its own world. Helena Marino is a prisoner of war, one of few resistance fighters still alive after her people lost the war against several families of malevolent necromancers. Helena's counterpart is Hermione, and in both stories, the protagonist, having lost many of her memories, is sent to the High Reeve, a high-ranking official among the Dark Forces with whom she eventually falls in love. The High Reeve in Manacled was, of course, Draco Malfoy, but he's given a new name, obviously, in this reworked version of the tale. The book, newly released, has already been greenlit with a massive film deal. However, the spice doesn't stop there. This novel is controversial precisely because of its ties to Harry Potter, with some feeling that supporting Harry Potter fanfiction is problematic in itself. But the author, SenLinYu, is non-binary. Therefore, it's a real gray area for people. Some feel the book's existence is transphobic, but to purchase the book would also financially support a trans author, assuming SenLinYu identifies with the trans label, given some non-binary individuals don't. It's an interesting development, to say the least. Then there are the usual complaints about dark romance as a whole, the disdain people have for fanfiction, and the mixed reviews the novel has received for its writing, being seemingly another popcorn book you either love or loathe, with few opinions in between. Before we get into that, though, I want to give a brief history lesson on the fanfiction to published novel pipeline. Alchemised isn't the first fanfiction to be reworked into an original book, and it won't be the last. Dramoni fanfiction specifically has seen a glut of releases this year, with several being turned into real books in original fantasy worlds now divorced from Harry Potter. The other notable example of this trend is Julie Soto's Rose and Chains, but there are others. Harry Potter fanfiction in general is almost a genre unto itself, with works like All the Young Dudes inspiring their own fandoms. In the case of All the Young Dudes, the Wolfstar trend, which pairs Sirius Black and Remus Lupin. The biggest fanfictions commonly pair characters with those they didn't end up with in the books. Hermione with Draco, Sirius with Lupin, or Ron with Luna. There's even a chunk of the fandom that ships Hermione with Snape, which seems like a bit of a yikes to me, but I digress. While Dramoni fiction is enjoying a moment, the popularization of Harry Potter fanfiction is nothing new. Decades past, we had another iconic Dramoni series, the Draco Trilogy, penned by none other than the best-selling author, Cassandra Clare. Though Clare faced her own controversy in relation to her saga, she, like other fic writers, went on to have a career in traditional publishing. While the Draco Trilogy wasn't directly adapted into a rewritten and original series, there are echoes of it in her Shadowhunter saga. Supposedly, a conversation between Draco and Hermione even made it into Shadowhunters, with the haughty character Jace being Claire's Malfoy equivalent. Though Shadowhunters is very much its own thing, I can confirm, having read her books, that there are echoes of Harry Potter, which I discussed in a previous video. This is bigger than Harry Potter, because fanfictions of novels being turned into real books began with a certain infamous series. Twilight, like Harry Potter, can be controversial in its own right, but its fanfiction turned novel counterpart is even more so. That fanfiction was Master of the Universe. Penned by E.L. James, it then became 50 Shades of Grey. It was 50 Shades of Grey which kicked off this trend, and those books still have people divided. I'm surprised no one else has made the comparison, but Alchemised is literally Harry Potter's version of 50 Shades of Grey, which says a lot in itself. It's a dark romance, it's a retelling of a fan fiction, its writing quality may or may not be suspect, and people either fanatically adore it or vehemently hate it. We're getting 50 Shades of Grey all over again, and from a franchise, Harry Potter, which has managed to become more controversial than Twilight. It's no small wonder this book, irrespective of its artistic merits, has caused such a stir. For my part, I'm interested in the larger conversations this book will spark. The inherent value of fanfiction, whether or not enjoyment of art can be immoral, what kinds of stories can make money, and whether or not dark romance as a genre is problematic. Those who take issue with Alchemised take issue with dark romance as a whole. and I can understand why. Dark romance usually features, even glorifies, the kinds of relationships which in real life would be toxic or abusive. In extreme cases, it sees the protagonist falling in love with someone who sexually abuses her. The love interests in these novels are stalkers, abusers physical or verbal, and are generally domineering, sometimes literally keeping the female protagonist in chains. Many of these romances open with the heroine being kidnapped, creating these Stockholm Syndrome dynamics. Overall, it's an issue I'm divided on. Despite being a fan of Twilight, I don't have a burning desire to read 50 Shades of Grey. Moreover, I've heard that Alchemised, like 50 Shades of Grey, isn't well written. Maybe I'm a hypocrite, given Twilight is no literary masterpiece and reviews are mixed, but books written ostensibly as dark romances haven't appealed to me previously. That said, I don't want to knock anything until I've tried it, but I have my reservations. At the same time, I understand Edward would be considered abusive in real life. Plenty of books I've enjoyed, like The Cruel Prince, Shatter Me, or ACOTAR, have an arguably unhealthy dynamic between the protagonist and the love interest. However, I know how to separate fiction from reality, and I read such stories for entertainment rather than as dating guides. My aversion to dark romance up to this point is the emphasis on the abuse and the extremes to which it's taken. In Twilight or Shatter Me, there's a larger story. Ergo, even if you hate the romance, there are other elements you can enjoy, like fake court politics or oppressive governments. I'm not a fan of Shatter Me's Warner, but I like the protagonist, Juliet, and the story as a whole. Plus, I want to clarify that I'm not opposed to triggering content in general. While some people might take issue, for example, with the scene in Kill Bill where the protagonist is sexually assaulted, I'm not against graphic depictions of heinous acts. I think we should explore such depictions because such events happen in real life and we shouldn't sugarcoat that reality. Moreover, I'll happily read a story that features a controversial relationship, provided the book is labeled as a horror or a thriller, because such relationships occur in real life, and I'm interested in the psychology of characters in those situations. What I'm not a personal fan of is a mixture of extreme abuse and love that's then treated as something to root for. If Alchemised ends with Helena putting a knife in the High Reeve's throat because she's learned to respect herself and overcome her baser impulses, I'd love that story. But I suspect, just based on what I've read, that this is not the case. Previously, I DNF'd another novel, Anne Rice's Sleeping Beauty, because I didn't like the way abuse was being portrayed as a positive thing. In Sleeping Beauty, the titular beauty is taken to a sex dungeon, controlled in a spooky castle by a domineering man who, in addition to other abuses, frequently spanks her. If that book was meant to be the literary equivalent of BDSM, I can respect its existence as a form of escapism for people, but it wasn't my cup of tea. There's a chance I'll react similarly to Alchemised, though there does seem to be a larger story, at least based on the description and the reviews I've read. However, beyond my personal preferences, I feel the genre has its place. My aversion to it doesn't preclude it from having value, and I know for many, the genre can be cathartic. I've even heard of victims of abuse reading dark romance because it's a way for them to process what happened to them. Many read dark romance for the same reason they read horror, because they like stories that are dark, twisted, and screwed up. Many would read Haunting Adeline for the same reason I, for example, would read Flowers in the Attic. I don't think readers of this genre actually support this kind of behavior in real life, any more than I would support the sexual abuse of children after reading Lolita. While I'm not usually interested in the kinds of stories dark romances tell, I am interested in stories that are equally controversial. I'm interested in reading Lolita and Flowers in the Attic. I enjoyed A Song of Ice and Fire, which features protagonists who murder, steal, and commit genocide. I feel I would be a hypocrite if I judged dark romance readers, because I like messed up shit too. It's just messed up in a different way. I think the claim that novels with dark or problematic romances cause people to end up in abusive relationships is unfounded. I'd be willing to be proven wrong. And if there's a study that links the consumption of dark romances to the perpetuation of abuse in relationships, I'll happily read it. However, until such a study is placed before me with concrete evidence, the fears built around such novels sound too much to me like the claims against rock and roll music or video games. Many express concern that playing a game like Skyrim, for example, causes people to be more violent in real life, a claim that's ultimately, to my knowledge, been debunked. For my part, I've joined a guild of assassins in Skyrim and roleplayed as a murderer. I've rooted for Tyrion in Game of Thrones, despite all the brutal murders he commits. That doesn't mean I'm pro-murder or more apt to kill people. And so it follows, at least by my logic, that readers of dark romance aren't pro-abuse. In short, I don't think reading or enjoying dark romance makes you anti-feminist. I don't think writing dark romance means you hate women, especially given most authors of the genre are female, or in SenLinYu's case, queer or marginalized. It is my opinion that dark romance exists as a way to explore darker fantasies of the bad boy, a perennial figure, or in my case, of the anti-hero, when I roleplay as an assassin in Skyrim or enjoy following morally gray characters like Tyrion or Daenerys. A lot of people that crap on dark romance love grimdark fantasy, which seems a bit hypocritical to me. That said, if we're playing devil's advocate, I can understand why people would be sensitive to the genre. Even if dark romantasy doesn't lead to the devaluing of women or the sugarcoating of sexual abuse, it can't be denied that women, as a whole, are being devalued en masse, or that sexual abuse is grossly downplayed. We exist in a culture that belittles and hurts women, and the popularity of a genre like dark romance could be seen as a symptom of our overall indifference to how women are treated. If we normalize sexual assault in real life, it hurts different when we then do likewise in our fiction. It leads to a bigger question. Is this just harmless escapism or a mirror of how we really see and think about women? Personally, I can't answer that question. I know that my own avoidance of the genre, when I'll otherwise consume similarly disturbing media, is likely rooted in my sensitivity around topics like abortion or sexual abuse. Being female, I feel very strongly about women's rights. That a man can sexually assault women and then be elected to run a country demonstrates for me how utterly our society devalues women. Therefore, having seen women be treated like crap in real life, I'm not eager to see them abused in my fiction. When it comes to women having their rights stripped from them, I prefer the books I read to be an escape from or a refutation of that. It's a complicated issue. I don't think SenLinYu or other similar writers are anti-feminist. And I don't think you're a misogynist for enjoying dark romance, any more than I'm a homicidal maniac for doing the Dark Brotherhood questline in Skyrim. But given the state of the world and how poorly we still treat women, I appreciate why a book like Alchemised can hit in all the wrong ways. I don't want to see dark romance be banned, because every reader is going to have their own very personal reasons for consuming the genre, or something similarly controversial. But I do think we need to have more conversations about what our most popular art reveals about us, and whether or not unhealthy relationship dynamics are too prevalent in the romance genre as a whole. Then there's the issue of Harry Potter fanfiction. There seems to be a growing belief that enjoying Harry Potter, irrespective of your views on Rowling, is transphobic in itself. Personally, I find this an extreme stance. As someone who feels strongly about women's rights and horrifying normalization of sexual abuse, I still read Neil Gaiman. I don't think enjoying Coraline makes me a misogynist, and I don't think enjoying Harry Potter as a piece of art makes me a transphobe. I personally believe in separating the art from the artist. According to some, that makes me juvenile, but I think it's juvenile to call someone juvenile for not viewing the world in the exact same way you do. I respect those who can't separate the art from the artist, and all I ask is to be respected in turn. It honestly pisses me off that my enjoyment of a work of fiction makes me worthy of ridicule, because I feel like I'm not allowed to enjoy anything anymore. I can't enjoy Coraline. I can't enjoy Twilight. I can't enjoy any of the art that means something to me without apparently being a bad person. I'm sorry about the rant, but even as someone who is very left-leaning, there are arguments from the left which will always rub me the wrong way, especially when they're delivered in a self-righteous manner. You're allowed to disagree with me, but if you think that justifies your making fun of me or insulting my intelligence because I see things from a different perspective, I have a problem with that. Of course, my definition of separating the art from the artist might differ from yours. For me, it doesn't mean financially supporting a creator who I believe is doing harm. When I talk about separating the art from the artist, I'm mostly talking about enjoying the art itself, reading used copies of their novels, doing a movie marathon of films I already own, or in the case of Alchemised, participating in the fandom through fan art or fan fiction. If there are people who believe enjoying the original Harry Potter books is wrong, there is an even more extreme opinion that enjoying fan fiction, even those written by queer authors looking to reclaim the story, is wrong. This argument posits that enjoying anything Harry Potter adjacent may lead to people then discovering Harry Potter and embracing all the baggage that comes with it. I'd argue that anyone who's reading Harry Potter fanfiction is already a Harry Potter fan, and that reading All the Young Dudes or Alchemized isn't going to compel one to then purchase a bunch of Harry Potter merchandise. Plus, the only people who haven't read the books or watched the films at this point are Gen Alpha, most of whom are too young to read Alchemized in the first place. This might be a hot take, but I think people should read Harry Potter. I'd encourage people to buy their copies used, but it's a genre staple. Pretending Harry Potter doesn't exist is ultimately futile. It's a cultural juggernaut. It's a touchstone in publishing history and has influenced writing and storytelling as a whole for decades to come. You can no more erase Harry Potter than you can erase Lord of the Rings or Star Wars. Plus, if you make the argument that Harry Potter should be forgotten, then you must also make the argument that H.P. Lovecraft, Patricia Highsmith, and Picasso should be forgotten. If an artist does something bad, their art ceases to have value, and therefore art is intrinsically worthless. I'm not saying you can't be critical of a piece of art, but I do take issue with bullying others for reading a book or engaging in a fandom. Alchemised is an original story, whatever its source of inspiration. You can hate Lovecraft for being a racist, but you can't deny the influence his work has had over other authors and novels. Writers like N.K. Jemisin have reclaimed Lovecraft's work, weaving his mythology into stories that instead champion the Black community. To me, there's a power in taking the art that speaks to you, or even frustrates you, and making it your own. If people want to rewrite Harry Potter and weave their own perspectives into that world, I think that's a beautiful thing. Seeing art grow from other art is inspiring. And if people still want to take inspiration from the works of Picasso, Rowling, or even Gaiman in order to create something unique, power to them. If you can't read Harry Potter anymore or participate in the fandom without feeling sick to your stomach, I respect that. But that's a personal choice. Like my choice until now not to read dark romance, even as I respect those who do. This is only my opinion, but I feel it's a stretch to suggest that Rowling will directly profit from SenLinYu's work, even if SenLinYu has marketed their work as a Harry Potter retelling. If others are to be praised for reinventing H.P. Lovecraft, it's a gross double standard to demonize them for doing the same with Harry Potter. I don't believe Alchemised will boost Rowling's profits, especially since many will buy the book without any awareness it relates to Harry Potter at all. Demonizing people for enjoying Harry Potter fanfiction crosses a line for me, especially since many can and do enjoy Harry Potter itself while still actively opposing Rowling's views. I see fanfiction as a way of reclaiming something that was special to us, of not allowing Rowling's rhetoric to taint a safe space and a community of which we are a part. Rowling might have written Harry Potter, but it was the fandom who created the Harry Potter community. And turning on each other, at least for me, means you're letting her poison something special. The community can exist independent of the author, because it is the people, not the author, which makes the community possible. And I am saddened by Rowling's actions because Harry Potter used to bring people together through artwork, through fan fiction, through this discovery of their own creativity, and through the solidarity found in connecting with other outcasts. That's part of what made Harry Potter special. Now it divides us. Even the act of writing fan fiction is controversial, an act of enjoyment on the part of a budding artist to be debated and analyzed in videos like this one. Since scripting this video, I must confess that, despite my current aversion to dark romance overall, I am curious about the genre. Having read and listened to reviews of Alchemised, I can't pretend I'm not intrigued. Even the bad reviews have piqued my curiosity, because when it comes to the discourse we're having around Alchemised and books like it, I do feel that any opinion I give is stronger if I've read the book myself and can therefore speak from a more educated position. I don't like to give an opinion on something I haven't actually read. Moreover, having done my own research, there are elements of Alchemised I could see myself liking. I enjoy horror and thrillers, and were I to view dark romance novels through that lens, as dark psychological stories rather than as actual romances, I suspect I might actually like some of them. After all, I don't love Twilight for its romance, but for its drama, its fantasy, and its occasionally comedic situations. Despite being a twihard, I've never had a thing for Edward. I was always Team Jacob. But beyond that, I just liked the conflict between the characters and the paranormal elements, like the werewolves and the Valkyrie. People read books for different reasons. I personally enjoy psychological horrors and thrillers. I enjoy stories where protagonists are taken to their darkest places. I loved Shatter Me, not because of Juliet's relationship with Warner, but because of how she survived and grappled mentally with the abuses she endured within a broken world. The more I read about Helena's situation in Alchemised, the more I'm reminded of Juliet's in Shatter Me, and that intrigues me. My desire to read Alchemised comes from the same place as my desire to read Flowers in the Attic. I want to explore the psyche of tortured characters in dire situations. Maybe that makes me morbid, but I find psychology fascinating, and I've always had a taste for the macabre. As for other reviews I've seen, many are reading Alchemised first and foremost as fantasy fans. These are readers who enjoy grimdark, and they're viewing Alchemised through that lens as a dark fantasy novel where morally gray characters make questionable choices. It's worth noting that in A Song of Ice and Fire, for example, Tyrion doesn't always treat women well, yet we root for him, not because he's a good person, but because he's a fascinating one. We avidly follow Daenerys' story, despite the fact she slaughters whole cities, not because we condone genocide, but because we find her journey an interesting one, full of twists and turns. Most of the protagonists in A Song of Ice and Fire are awful people, or at least very morally gray, but we nevertheless enjoy exploring their psychology, their innermost thoughts, and we wait with bated breath to see what they do next. Jaime Lannister literally attempts to murder a child, but I didn't see readers rejecting his redemption arc or claiming that A Song of Ice and Fire encourages homicide. I can separate fiction from reality in that regard, and I can choose as a reader to view Alchemised through that dark fantasy lens, to read it the way I'd read George R.R. Martin rather than the way I'd read Emily Henry or even Sarah J. Maas. That's not to say I won't still find elements of the book disturbing in the wrong way, or that I don't think the author could have excluded certain plot points. But my dislike for one part of the story doesn't preclude me from enjoying other aspects of it. And the way fantasy fans have talked about this novel has sparked my interest. I also think dark romance, if that's what you're coming to this book for, should be treated as distinct from vanilla romance. If I come into this book and get offended after all the research I've done, that's kind of on me, because I'm going in knowing what I'm signing up for. I understand being fatigued by toxic relationship dynamics in romance generally. For instance, I was a little taken aback when I read the first Bridgerton novel, because those books are marketed as Jane Austen-inspired novels with a spicy twist. Their covers are bright and cheerful, with lots of blues, pinks, and pastels. So the scene in which Daphne removes Simon's consent felt off. My reservations about Daphne's behavior didn't ruin the rest of the series for me. Mostly Daphne's character was ruined for me, because I couldn't look at her the same way after that. But I still loved the other books, and have nothing against Julia Quinn. She made a plot choice I didn't like, but I still respect her as a person. Likewise, I can love ACOTAR while still disagreeing with some of the things Rysand does. After all, one of Feyre's first interactions with Rysand involves him blackmailing her. He'll cure her fatal injuries if she allows herself to be bonded to him, literally leaving permanent ink on her skin to signify his contract with her. I get why some readers are iffy about those dynamics, especially if they just want a wholesome romance to root for. But I also chose to view those books as fantasy novels with dark undertones. Rysand is a member of the Fae, and Fae can be cruel and capricious beings. Rysand isn't human, which is why I don't necessarily hold him to the same standard I would a human being in real life. This is a different world from our own, an occasionally dark and twisted one, which means it's not going to operate on the same rules as ours. If you can take the story and its messed up society for what it is and divorce it from our reality, it can be highly entertaining. If you can't read about a fictional world whose morals don't echo our own, that's a personal choice. This is just how I read these kinds of books, and why I'm still able to enjoy them despite the problematic behavior of the characters. When it comes to Alchemised, the cover is dark and moody. I'm not going in expecting anything like Bridgerton. I'm going in as a fan of dark fantasy and troubled anti-heroes. I'm going in as someone who loves psychology, horror, and the macabre. If I do rethink my stance on dark romance, I'll enjoy the genre the way I enjoy thrillers, horrors, grimdarks, or gothics, rather than as actual romance. I'm not saying that's the right way to enjoy books like this, but in viewing Alchemised as a graphically violent gothic novel or psychological horror, I honestly feel I could enjoy it. But we'll see. All this to say that, after scripting this video and doing further research, I felt compelled to read the book myself and form my own opinion. If you want to see me as a bad person if I end up liking this novel, that's your problem. I'm all for women's rights and bringing down the patriarchy. And if my enjoyment of a piece of fiction in a fantasy world that doesn't operate within the same rules as ours makes me a misogynist in your eyes, that's your business. All I can do is explain my thought process and form an opinion of this book based on my own observations and preferences, and hope you respect my opinion. That you allow other readers to like what they like while you like what you like. The people I saw talking about this book were from all walks of life. There were women, men, and trans individuals who enjoyed this story, either for the psychological exploration of its characters, the commentary on war and grief, or the fantasy elements. And I didn't get misogyny or transphobia from these reviewers in the least. One fan was a polite non-binary individual who adores fantasy and practices vegetarianism. Not exactly my picture of a raging anti-feminist. Therefore, based on not only the reviews I've taken in, but the variety of people championing this story, I need to read the book and form my own opinion before I cast aspersions on others. If nothing else, I'm intrigued as a dark fantasy fan and a lover of psychological thrillers. I enjoyed Anne Rice's Mayfair Witches trilogy, wherein characters arguably do worse shit than they do in Alchemised. I loved Ava Reed's Juniper and Thorn, Angela Carter's The Magic Toy Shop, and George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire. so that should give you an idea of my tastes and my context for being interested in this story. Dark romance may or may not be my cup of tea, and from a writing perspective, I might hate Alchemised when I read it. But on the grounds I've mentioned, I'll defend it. I'll defend any and all genres and stories which are attacked on the premise they shouldn't exist. I believe all stories, all genres have their place. I'll defend the fantasy genre from those who believe it's frivolous and detached from reality. I'll defend the classic literature canon from those who believe its outdated qualities strip it of any value. I'll defend DEI titles from those looking to erase anything which isn't white and heteronormative. I'll defend romance and its subgenre dark romance even as someone who doesn't read those genres. Finally, I'll defend fanfiction, whether it's Harry Potter related or not, because I see it as a vehicle by which the next generation of writers will discover their voices. I don't read much fanfiction, but does fanfiction have value? Absolutely, and I'm sick of the stigma fic writers face. Wattpad books might not be well written, but every writer has to start somewhere, and if Harry Potter leads to other writers discovering their voices and sharing their truth, I'm not going to shit on that. In short, whether I like dark romance or not, I'm happy for SenLinYu. I'm happy to see a marginalized creator reclaim something controversial and make it their own. I'm happy to see someone trans inadvertently earn millions because Harry Potter exists. If SenLinYu isn't valid in retelling a popular story with controversial origins, then it follows that the hundreds of writers who put a feminist twist on Dracula, who modernize otherwise misogynistic Greek myths, who reinvent fairy tales, and who incorporate Lovecraft into Black storytelling are likewise invalid. SenLinYu has taken lemons and made them into lemonade, and I commend them for that. As it stands, their book didn't initially sound like something I'd enjoy. But when people started bashing the book and making fun of it and the author, the way they have so many others, a part of me bought it out of spite. Because I'm fucking sick of this need to hate everything and belittle people for having different tastes. I'm sick of hearing romantasy get bashed. I'm sick of people making fun of others for liking Twilight. If you don't like a genre and you want to critique it, that's fair. But stop shitting on people who do. I'm not a fan of dark romance, but I will defend the genre with my dying breath. Because I am a romantasy fan, and I know how it feels to have my intelligence questioned, to have my validity as a reader put into doubt, because I was stupid enough to enjoy a book about hot fae. If people said, hey, I don't like this, but power to you if you do, I'd be okay with that. But I'm done with the fact that every goddamn book, movie, and video game has to be a controversy before it's even released. I'm done with bashing things, even if they do suck, because it's mean-spirited, and worse, whatever thing is getting crapped on is, 9 times out of 10, written by a woman or someone from a marginalized group. It hasn't escaped my notice that people, even those on the left, are harder on books written by minority authors. Several Dramoni fanfictions have been adapted into original books this year. But of course, it's the book by a non-binary author that's problematic. That people are choosing to attack the trans author out of all the others in the name of trans rights does make me wonder if we have some internalized shit to unpack. But I digress. I hope I'm wrong. I hope the fact that it's a non-binary author getting scrutinized where other writers weren't is a complete coincidence. But I don't know. I'd love to hear what you think. Overall, this release, if nothing else, has started a number of interesting conversations about the validity of the dark romance genre, the morality of taking inspiration from a controversial source, the artistic merit of fanfiction, or the kinds of stories and authors we want to support. The book might be terrible, but I nevertheless wish SenLinYu all the best. Because if a writer writes a book and other readers love it, that's what's important in the end. And my personal tastes don't diminish the joy a new voice has already brought others. Thank you for watching, and happy reading.